Hi, everyone. My name is Shelley Reed. I am the manager of the Legal Services National Technology Assistance Project. We like to call it Ellison TAP because it's a whole lot easier to say. I am a white female with shoulder-length brown hair. I wear glasses. And today I'm coming to you from my office where I have pictures of my favorite place in the world, Pensacola, Florida's beach. And today we're here to have our second session on our RFP series. And Sarah Cross is going to lead us into the second part of learning about making your RFP process better all through the process, from projects to proposals, and then to progress and measuring ROI. So Sarah, take it over.
Thank you very much. My name is Sarah Cross. I'm always so bad at these visual descriptions. I am a white woman with multiple colored hair. And yeah, I can't do more of a visual description than that. I'm sitting in my office, but I have a background that is from an art piece from 1,000 museums. And I have a slightly black eye, and it is not because of abuse. It's because my cat keeps jumping on my face while I'm asleep. So I think that's what it was. I'm not sure. I tried to cover it with makeup and I'm very bad at that. So if you need to visualize that as the visual for what I've got going on in this whole look here. Anyway, Sarah Cross, I'm the project manager at Lakeshore Legal Aid. I have been an attorney at Legal Aid since 2017. So going on my 8th year here at Lakeshore. And I've been an attorney, graduated in 2003, so 22 years. I know that's hard to believe because I look like I'm 22, so definitely difficult to believe that I've been an attorney as long as my age appears. This is part of a 3-part series about requests for proposals, or commonly known as RFPs. And in our last series, our first episode, installment, whatever you'd like to call it, last month, we had a special guest, Adam from Briefly, and we talked about, in kind of a conversational style, what it is that makes a good RFP, what are the red flags to avoid. And I thought it was a very engaging and informative conversation. And if you weren't able to attend that, I would recommend watching the video. But in this month's installment, we are going to talk about, like, once you get all the proposals, what do you do with them? And how do you evaluate those proposals in a kind of organized way? Of course, I suppose you could just evaluate based on vibes and feelings, but I like to take a more measured approach to it, and have some kind of like justifiable metrics that we can present when people are asking us why we did it this way and why we picked this person. So I'm going to share now my screen. Second here. It's being recorded. Presentation. Oh, I've somehow accidentally just gotten my just bear with me for 1 second. I'm sorry, everybody. Apparently I closed my actual presentation and left only the
While Sarah's getting the presentation open,
sorry, everyone.
no worries. I just wanted to let people know, if you
Present.
have questions, drop them in the chat and we'll make sure that we can get those answered throughout the presentation. And looks like we're ready to go again.
Great. It's these pop-ups that you can't see when you're on your end that block everything, that just get in the way and they drive me nuts. But I made my presentations in Canva usually, even though Microsoft PowerPoint is great. I really love Canva. It is a pro tip that I would give to everybody, and nonprofits can get a free subscription to it, or a free license for using Canva. And it has AI built into it. It makes presentations very easy. And I personally really like it. I think it has a lot more templates than PowerPoint. So if you want to check it out, I would highly recommend Canva. And a couple of ground rules or kind of norms. I have shrunk everybody's faces down so I can't see. If you're asking questions, can you please just interrupt me because I'm not going to see you raising your hand. Because in order to be able to see the presentation, I just kind of close the box that shows everybody. So I won't know if you're asking a question by raising your hand. And I'd like to start with a little kind of reflection question if people want to drop their answers in the chat. When you think back to the last time your organization hired an outside contractor or vendor, if you were involved in that process, what worked really well and what would you do differently? And we're going to this session is going to be a little bit about that. Like, what are the best practices and like, what things should you avoid doing? And I love to get the feedback in the chat. That way I can kind of get an idea of what has gone well for people. And I love to learn from my own mistakes and other people's mistakes. So this is going to be about the vetting and evaluation process. I have to apologize to everybody. I have been on vacation all week. And by vacation, I mean staycation. And so I'm not really in like that work mindset. So might be a little bit on the struggle bus here. As I said, this 3-part series. The first part was crafting effective RFPs. We're on the vetting and evaluation process session today. And next time, I'm going to show you how to do an ROI, which is return on investment. And that is sort of unusual in the nonprofit context because we're not making a profit. And a lot of times when people think of an ROI, they're thinking of like, how did they make more money or sell more widgets to people? And so they're often underused in nonprofit contexts, but I find that it has a really specific and helpful usage here and can help you prepare for writing grants and reporting on grants. And so I'm going to go through kind of how I make these ROI reports. And I think it's important in the RFP process to have that outcome in mind because knowing what success is going to look like with a project will help you write your RFP and also help you evaluate who you should pick to be your partner in your project. Today, we're going to start with kind of the introduction and objectives, building an evaluation team or committee, we call them at Lakeshore, drafting the evaluation criteria, and if I'm not too long-winded, hopefully a period for questions and answers. Also, if I'm speaking too fast, please just let me know. And all these slides will be available for download as a PDF. So I put some extra wordage in there if you want to refer to it later. So when you're doing your proposals, you've spent all the time to do a request for proposals, you've put it out. Hopefully you've gotten like really good responses. And it can be really difficult to pick a person and to figure out how you go forward with all these proposals, right? But it's probably the most important part because projects succeed or fail based on who you partner with. And the right person, the right contractor will help you make a better project. And the wrong one can really derail timelines, increase your budget, and reduce the quality of your outcomes. And so we owe it to ourselves, to our staff, and to the people that we serve to do the best that we can with this process. And in the law, we love to call that due diligence, of course. And if we do our due diligence, and I think that's especially important with proper evaluations, it can really help you avoid surprises and reduce all of your risks. And then, of course, you want to make sure that you are aligned. A lot of companies are really good at selling. They're selling their service to you and they want your business. And then it turns out that they don't really understand what your values and your mission are. And in this kind of work, that is very, very important to us. So I think part of the evaluation process always has to involve figuring out if the person that you're working with gets it, gets what you're doing, and is also kind of committed to the work. It doesn't mean they can't still make money on the project, but like, do they understand what the purpose of this project is? And if you don't do a quality evaluation process, you can fall into these pitfalls. If you pick just on price, which is an incredibly important concern with nonprofits, especially legal aid, like we do not have money to waste. But if you pick the cheapest partner, oftentimes they've under budgeted for the work. So they're either going to do a crappy job on the work or end up saying, hey, we're 3/4 of the way done. We need another $10,000 or $20,000 to make it through the rest of this. That's a nightmare, right? And you don't want to be stuck in that situation. And sometimes being cheap costs you money. Like there's that saying, it's expensive to be poor. It can also be expensive to, partner with the cheapest person. And I'm not saying that the least expensive person might not be the best choice, but I wouldn't base my decision on that alone. You shouldn't have just one person or two people making the decision. You are missing out on diverse perspectives and the potential for red flags. And if you've ever been to one of my presentations before, I always encourage people to include naysayers in their process, like the person who always sends complaining emails, the person who is hard to get on board. They are often very, very good at spotting red flags, and their brain works in a different way than yours, maybe. And so if you include them, number one, if you win them over and they're part of the process, they're not complaining at meetings or the announcement of this new software that you're going to be using and making everybody else, spoiling the pot for everybody else, but also like you might have been able to create a better project or a better product because you had that person's perspective. And also not defining what success looks like up front. I know sometimes we want to go into projects and be like, we don't have a desired outcome. Like we don't know what the solution should be. And it's fine to not know what the best solution is, but you should know what a success in the project is to you. Like, is it to save money? Is it to save staff time? Is it to make staff happier in their jobs? Is it to serve more clients? You need to know what a couple of these success points would be so that you can evaluate who the good partners are and whether the project is worth doing and whether the project is working and is on time and on task. And since many of our projects are funded by grants, hopefully you have already kind of come up with what some of these success measurements would be, because you're trying to convince a funder to give you the money to do the project. A strong evaluation process should enable you to have clear, objective decisions based on structured criteria, not guesswork or gut instinct or, vibes or feelings. And sometimes like our gut instinct is kind of spot on, but it's nice to be able to say, I just don't think this partner is going to be a good fit for us. And that's your gut instinct, but because they're not good at communication or because their timelines seemed much shorter than everyone else's and they couldn't explain to us why that was. Like they didn't say they had twice as much staff or, a more sophisticated process. So it's nice to have like something to back up the instincts. Better collaboration with your internal teams. It's hard anytime you're changing something. An RFP almost always means updating a system, changing processes, looking at processes. And if you involve stakeholders and your coworkers in this process, you are going to have a better experience overall with getting them on board and them helping get their coworkers on board. Accountability and documentation. If you have to explain what you did and why you did it, if you document that really well, that's going to help. And if you are funding your project with LSC's money, you've got to follow your internal accounting practices, plus all the LSC regulations, and all of that involves documentation. So you might as well be on top of it from the get-go. And then strong long-term partnerships with vendors who are a good fit. It is really good to develop strong partnerships with people who understand what we're doing, what our mission is, and being able to work with the same people again in the future on other projects can be a huge benefit to us. It's like retaining staff, right? There's a cost to getting new people onboarded, just like there's a cost to getting, working with a brand new partner. If you work, I'm not saying you should stagnate and only work with the same partners all the time, but once you get a good relationship, it is nice to be able to go to that person in the future or that partnership organization and say, hey, we're looking at this project. Can you give us some estimates? Can you give me some feedback on my RFP? And to be able to have that partnership going forward. You also need to have, because it's not a good idea to have just one person making the decision or one or two, you need to also build an evaluation team. We call it a committee here, because everybody's having to say. They shape who you are going to hire. So you need to have the right mix of people. If you have a well-rounded committee, it's going to ensure that there's fair, informed, and balanced decision-making in the process. And more perspectives, more eyes on a situation usually leads to a better outcome. That said, it is not the United Nations. You can't have, it probably wouldn't make sense to have one representative from every department or, one person from each team, because if you get a team that's too big, it's going to be too unmanageable. You got to balance that. I think the best practices for selecting committee members are including staff from different roles. We try to have, rule of thumb, 4 to 6 people on our committees. And we try to make sure that if it's going to touch IT, we have somebody in IT. If it's going to touch a certain program like accounting, obviously we've got to have somebody from accounting. And we usually try to get people from various levels in the org. So admins, actual end users. I mean, if your team is mostly management and they don't use the software on the daily, what feedback are they going to give in this process? They're going to pick something and then staff are going to use it and they're going to be like, this doesn't work for our workflows. So you need to get kind of like up and down and across representation. And that seems a little bit difficult to do when you're limited to 4 to 6 people, but I assure you, you can. And try to get people that do different things with the software, like people that understand the technical end of it, how it's going to mesh with other systems that you use, and people that you will be using it regularly. Also, you want to mix the leadership and frontline staff, like I just said. If you don't have people that are going to be the end users, at least one of them on your team for selecting the consultants, it's not going to turn out well. And you need to have that mix of people. You also need management. We have had, if I had to say what one of our pitfalls has been, I would say that like not having management participate in the vetting and evaluation process and kind of coming on afterward. It never works out well. I mean, people want to know and feel knowledgeable when their staff come to them with questions. And so getting management, or at least 1 or 2 people on management, involved in the vetting process is really critical to that, because people are going to ask them questions and then resentment builds if they're not informed. And they are also going to look at it from a different perspective than the end users. They might say, well, in the past, when we've tried something like this, my staff have complained, or I think this is going to be really difficult to train new staff on. So they're going to be seeing things that, the end users might not be seeing. And sometimes management are the end user of the product. And as I said, I always get a very untechnological person. If we're doing anything with technology, I pick somebody who doesn't know how to use it. Like I have a few go-tos. I'm not going to name names, but I cannot underestimate how important it has been to me to have people that are not very tech savvy involved from the beginning, because they see problems with software and problems with vendors that others don't. And one of those biggest problems is like training and evaluation, like training and how are they going to understand the materials that are coming their way? Like if you make a manual and they can't understand how to read it, all of that is really important. If they're not going to be able to communicate their needs effectively with a person because this group is too technical. I think it's really important to get a couple people that you don't think are like the strongest with technology if it's a technology project. Also, I never just pick like teachers' pets. Um, Sometimes the best person to have on your project team is the person who is the quietest at the meeting, doesn't speak up at group meetings. A lot of times there's this kind of feeling that the people that talk at meetings are the ones who are really passionate about it and they're going to give the most to the project. But sometimes the fact that they don't give anybody else in the room time to speak or the space to speak, and they're just sucking up all the air in the room doesn't necessarily mean that other people aren't also passionate. So I would recommend thinking about the person who maybe sends a thoughtful email after the fact, or, asks questions in an email or a chat, or comes up to you, like as people that are also interested in pursuing projects and being a part of the decision-making process. And sometimes those people, like maybe they take 2 or 3 days to think about the information. They can be really, really important team members. So I think it's easy to fall in the trap of being like, this is my go-to person. I pick them for every single project. Also, maybe they're burned out, so give them a break. And one of our practices is that we have a union. So we always make sure that we ask the union if they can put a person forward, a volunteer or somebody that they want. And we do not let management veto that. If the union puts somebody forward and they're going to have time to do the work and not to be like, committing malpractice or something, derelicting their duties, they're going to be a part of the process. I usually send an email to the union, like leadership, that just says, hey, this is the project. We're looking for, someone who maybe has experience with this, or somebody who might work in this particular office. And then we take who they give us. I think this is really important because when folks have a voice in the process, they are going to get on board. And it also can kind of avoid complaining and blaming and things after the fact. So it's good to include all people in the process, or a variety of people in the process. Like I said before, if anybody has questions, please stop me and just ask.
We do have two in the chat, and I
Okay.
was trying to think of if they were best now or if they should come in earlier. So the first one is a suggestion to reach out to references that are listed, but try to reach out to folks you might know at organizations that have worked with the prospect. So that goes, back to a point that you were talking about earlier. And then we have another question, or that's actually a question. Are there any tips you have for helping executive leadership see benefits of a project they may not be sold on right away?
So I will go into that in real detail in the ROI session next week, but I think that it is more clients served, higher staff satisfaction. I do a lot of analysis of time saved. And so I will oftentimes be able to justify a project where maybe like we added a button that's like add referral. And when you press this button, you can kind of type into our system the names of organizations, and then you can just press text this to the client. So instead of having to go into the wiki, cut and paste that information, and then manually send the text message, it's kind of automated. And it wasn't cheap. It wasn't the most expensive thing that we've done. And, there was some resistance because they're like, we already have a solution, like just cut and paste it into there. But in the long run, the add referral button only took 7 seconds to use, and it was probably taking a minute or two to do the cut and paste version. And then I kind of extrapolated out based on the number of referrals that we were doing before versus the number of referrals we started doing afterwards, the number of minutes that were saved. And it added up into like, I think 8 weeks of a full-time staff attorney's time. So like extrapolating the overall savings across 1 year, and how many more clients could be served if you saved 8 weeks of full-time work across all of your organization. Additionally, like the ability to track who you're texting referrals to, and then to target those people for outreach and community partnerships, and to be able to go to the funders and say, listen, we've sent our clients to 20,000, we've sent out 20,000 referrals to program partners. So things that I think help sell projects really are like, how are we going to save time or money with this project, even if it seems small? If you can extrapolate it out to a bigger picture view of it, things that make for compelling narratives to future funders, and things that increase staff satisfaction, or address things in your strategic plan, or address recommendations from an LSC visit. But we can go into that in a lot of detail in the next session too. Additionally, like I've kind of already covered this, you should try to get at least one person who's got experience. So if it's an IT type project, you need an IT person. If it's a case management software, you don't want just IT people and people from accounting, right? You're going to need the lawyers or paralegals or legal assistants involved in that. If we were doing like our project with referrals, we wanted some of our client support advocates, which is what we call our kind of quasi social workers, to be involved, because they're the ones using it a lot, and they also know like how many referrals they give a client on average. And so it's important to also get subject matter experts on your team, but not only those people, because then you'll only get one perspective. Once you form your team, you need to talk to them. I have a team launch meeting and I give them copies of our handbook and our evaluation metrics, which we're going to go through. But I think it's important to know what you're asking people to do as part of the team, and to make sure they know what their role is. It's very unfair to invite people to be a part of a team and not have them not know what they're signing up for. And when we ask for volunteers, I tell them what is going to be expected out of them. And we actually usually carve out time ahead of time for when we're going to have meetings with our vendors, and when we're going to have our kickoff meeting. And then we put that into the like request email. Hey, we're looking for volunteers to be a part of this committee. These are the dates that you're going to need to be available. And we expect that you will be available at all those dates, unless there's something else, some accessibility thing like emergency. Please make other plans, because I wouldn't want to cut somebody off make them unable to participate if they had like a legitimate reason, like pre-planned vacation, something with their children, things like that. There's got to be a chair. They didn't even have to be a decision maker. Sometimes your chairperson or facilitator is just the person who does all the kind of wedding planning part of it, right? Like your project manager. It could be an administrative assistant, the person who just makes sure that everything is getting done when it's supposed to be getting done, schedules the meetings, sends out reminder emails, things like that. The coordinator, kind of. And you need to have the folks that are scoring and evaluating. And what I recommend is that everybody reads these proposals individually, scores them against the criteria, and then you pick the top 3 or 4 to go forward into like actual meetings. And once you have those meetings, then you'll have some additional like debriefs and things. But I wouldn't want to spend my time meeting with every single person who put an RFP in. I mean, I want to narrow it down and to be respectful for people's time. And then, you might need to reach out to, if a person's a subject matter expert, then you want to let them know, hey, we've got you on this team. Are you willing to field any questions people have when they're reading these about, your area of expertise? Like if they don't understand something technical, can they reach out to you with the IT questions? And then you should always have some person who does note-taking or process support, and you should ask them ahead of time if they're willing to do that. Some people do not want to be the note taker because they cannot pay attention or participate in the meeting and take the notes at the same time. So if you're going to ask somebody to be the note taker, I would ask them ahead of time.
Yeah, and I just want to insert in here, note taking is so important on projects. You know, I think we've all experienced, or probably many of us have experienced, where late in the project, somebody starts asking about something, and we know that decisions were made, but we don't know what the decision was. So documenting all of decisions and
Mhm.
having that note taking definitely is something that's very important, because you can go back and find the answers instead of giving conflicting answers and causing confusion down the road.
Yep, I totally agree. I mean, I personally like to record the meetings and take the transcript, but some people will not share openly if you're recording the meeting. And so you have to kind of balance that. I mean, some people just don't want their raw opinions recorded for posterity, but you should record what the decisions are, what the next steps are. And I always send a post-meeting summary, like, this is what I believe we decided on, and what we're going to do next. If you think there's something wrong with that, or that's inaccurate, please let me know. Because I have found also sometimes you think you've come to a consensus, and after the fact, you realize no one else thought you came to a consensus. So it's always good to follow up. So how do I functionally do this? I have a little orientation and training to go over the scoring rubric. And then I set expectations about what we're going to do, how your reviews are confidential, or if they're not, if they're going to be available to everybody, that we want to be objective. Please don't play favorites. I mean, I think if we're working with vendors, oftentimes we have somebody we'd prefer to work with, but you need to give everybody a fair shake. And assign the clear roles. And if you have to, sometimes in the interviews of vendors or the meetings with the vendors, you might want to assign questions and have people ask them, like, these are the questions you're going to ask, and kind of let them rotate through, because you don't want just one person dominating. And then my pro tip is make sure you tell staff how you want them to bill for all the time they spend doing the evaluation, because it's going to be outside of their normal work. And if they have to bill it to a certain grant or under a certain like matter or activity code, you really want to make sure that they do that. And if you're trying to track how much time was spent on a particular project, which I do for ROIs, what I usually do is kind of put my time in as an example, and I give them that as a screenshot. Like, please use this title. Please put your time in this way. Otherwise, people will do wild and crazy things when they bill their time, and it might be a lot of extra work for you to fix it. Now you've got your team together. What are your evaluation criteria? You've got your RFP, you've got your team together, and you need to figure out how you're actually going to do the evaluation. Obviously, I've done this before. I put my team together, and really before I do at the same time I'm doing the RFP, because you need to know what you want out of the process when you're drafting the RFP to have a good RFP. But in the order in this presentation, like, what is the evaluation criteria? It's coming after all of that. It's important to have clear evaluation criteria, because it helps make sure that all of the proposals are reviewed consistently and fairly, and we care about fairness in the work that we do. And we want to be able to justify it and get it approved if it's over 25,000 by LSC, or maybe by our board of directors, and they're going to ask these kinds of questions. We want to have a transparent decision-making process so that we can explain and defend why we made this decision. Sometimes you work with someone or you pick a vendor and you just think it's going to be wonderful. And then after the fact, you're like, this is not what we thought we were getting. But if you document why you made your decisions, it's going to be a lot easier to kind of explain where you're coming from. And then you want to align your selection, the choice that you pick, with what matters to your organization and your values. – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – – –– – – –– ––– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– –– – RFP or proposals, not RFPs. And that is the three pillars of evaluation. The first one is quality. Do they have experience and expertise? Do they have a proven track record with similar projects? I think when it comes to AI, it's very new, so it's going to be harder to find a company that has like a track record of making an AI chatbot for a legal aid. Like how many could those have been made by now, right? Not a lot. So you might not want that to be conclusive, but like, do they have experience in a similar kind of project? Evaluate the approach and methodology. Are their proposed solutions thoughtful, feasible, and aligned with your needs? Is there anything that jumps out about their proposal that seems crazy? Like they're telling you they can get it done in half as much time as everybody else. They're promising you things that you don't feel that are achievable. Like the scope of what they say they can deliver is twice as much as what other people say they can deliver. I mean, just be careful not to get sold a song and dance is really kind of what this part is. And then, of course, as was pointed out before, consider their references and past performance. And I do like the idea of not only reaching out to the person at the organization that they recommended you talk to, but maybe somebody else. Because it's quite possible that other people will have a different perspective on working with them than their point person that they told you to reach out to. If you have a good relationship with those people, it might be a good idea to ask them their honest opinion. Also compensation. Like, again, we've already talked about, like, don't just look at the lowest bid, but look at cost effectiveness. Sometimes the lowest bid is not sustainable. Like it's very cheap upfront, but it has a large carrying cost or an ongoing maintenance cost. It doesn't take those things into account. You really have to kind of consult with your accounting people to see, like, does this seem reasonable? Is the pricing clear? Is it justified? Is it completely out of bounds? You're going to see that there's going to be somebody who's really, really high on the end, and then somebody who's on the low end. And, there's probably something amiss with those proposals. They didn't understand what you were asking for. They're not going to be able to deliver what you want. And then watch for hidden fees or vague cost structures. If it doesn't seem like it's going to be sustainable, I always ask things like, we were getting Zoom phone and it was all going to be brought into our system, and data storage is very expensive on Salesforce. And I was like, how much data is saving every one of these phone calls in our system going to use? Because that's a hidden fee. And I wanted to make sure that, like, yeah, your Zoom phones are pretty reasonable, but there's going to be other fees for storing all this information. Is it going to increase your backup, the fees for your backup services? Is it going to, text messaging? Do you have to have a separate phone number for every person? Like maybe they build a system for you, but you have to have software that you constantly have. And that little bit of software can add up. Like you build a survey system or you build an intake, and instead of building it on the, form assembly that you already use, they want to use Typeform or another system. And you're going to have to pay for that every single year for perpetuity. So you need to look at, like, have they figured all the costs in? And then other things like value. It's not just about the dollars and cents. Like, are there things that you're getting for the money that make it more worthwhile? Like, is it much easier to use? Is it much more straightforward? Is it going to be easier to onboard staff into? Training is going to be simpler. So there are, time costs money. If it's really hard for people to learn how to use it, it has this high learning curve, it might not be the right one just because it's cheaper, because it's a cost to have staff training and training and training. And then finally, legal compliance and risk. You want to make sure that whichever software you use follows all the regulations that we're underneath of. Contractual regulations, regulatory regulations, data privacy. Are they insured? Do they have all the right stuff, the right papers to do the work that they're doing? And are there conflicts of interest or other risk factors? Some of the things that I think are good for evaluations and categories of evaluation are like their technical capabilities and their subject matter expertise. their proposed work plan and timeline. If it seems like way too long or way too short, you might need to ask some additional questions. Are they going to be a fit for your mission and the culture of your organization? Sometimes for-profit companies just do not get what we do. And a lot of times when you're working with for-profit companies instead of nonprofits, they'll say things like your customers. And you're like, no, they're not customers, they're people, they're clients. And they'll speak in terms of sales. And it can be really difficult to kind of get your mission across and to get what you need out of the partnership if they don't understand what you're doing. And then, of course, accessibility practices. Do they understand what your user needs are going to be? Are they good at communicating? And what are they going to do in terms of responsiveness? Like, what do they do if there's something urgent? How long are they going to give you support during and after the project? Can you understand what they're saying to you? Because sometimes these folks speak very technically, and then the staff don't understand what they're saying to them. And it's like you're speaking two different languages and you just don't get a good end product. And then, of course, sustainability. Is your proposal something that we're going to be able to sustain? Have you taken into account that we have to keep updating our wiki? Have you taken into account that, our staff levels might ebb and flow? And like, what if we reduced our staff? And are we going to be locked into paying for 400 phone numbers when we only have 200 staff? Things like that. And then you will probably want to customize some of the criteria to fit your organization. So I think this is where really knowing what you want out of the project comes in. What are your priorities? What would make a project successful to you? What has gone wrong in the past that you want to avoid? And then I weigh all of the criteria. So like, what is it that, how important are each of these different evaluation criteria? I think it's really important to have a conversation about this when you're doing the evaluation. Like, we have to stay on cost, and then we want quality to be second, and then other things are going to be weighted less importantly. Or maybe for you, it is all about the values of the organization that you're working with and them seeing your vision and helping you do it. So it's important to kind of weigh the values. I'm going to show you what this means in just a second. And then you want to use input from your staff on what they think should be involved in the evaluation process and what they believe is important. We have kind of a handbook for how we evaluate projects, and then we tweak it based on the project, but it's, I think, a good starting point. I'm gonna stop sharing this to show you the evaluation things that we use. So we have a evaluation team handbook, and I have given this stuff to Shelley, and everywhere where it said Lakeshore, I changed it to company. And so you can use this kind of rough draft of it. Ours is a little bit different than this, but this is kind of a good starting point. And when I have my first meeting with the evaluation committee or evaluation team, we go through this really quickly. And it's long, but I think it's an important reference. I start off by saying, hey, thanks for volunteering to do this with us. And then, because a lot of people haven't been part of it before. And so they don't really know what it is. They don't know what an RFP is. They don't know what you're asking them to do. And people want to know what they're supposed to do so they can do it the right way, in my experience. We talk about the roles and responsibilities right in here. Like, you are an evaluator. This is your role. You're the procurement lead. You're the evaluation team chairperson. This is what you're supposed to do. And so they know, and there's no question if they don't do it, that they didn't get the information and they didn't know. And then I kind of go over what is an evaluation, what is a request for proposal, and then what are we going to do in this? And I map out what the first meeting is going to be like. All of this is in the handbook, so I don't have to do it over and over again each time that I do one of these. And then I talk about how, what we're going to do, what different options that we have, which one we picked. And then I go through like what the evaluation worksheet is going to be. and how you're going to use it. And, I cover all those things. It's confidential, it's individual. You do not need to meet with a group. You should be doing this on your own. Don't talk to the bid respondents. Don't let people reach out to you and sway your opinion, kind of evaluate it as it is. And then I talk about what we're going to do. We're going to get all of your evaluations together, and I'm going to add the scores up. I'm not going to read every page of this, but I just wanted to show you this in general. And then I talk about how we're going to do our interviews with our vendors after we pick the top 3. But mostly what this is used for is to reference, like, okay, our first metric that we're going to score on is qualifications and experience. That's going to be 20% of the weighted score. And these are some things that you would look at, like evaluate relevant experience and credentials of the team that you're going to be working with. A company might be incredibly experienced in doing the work that they're doing, but if they're proposing a team of brand new people, that might not be a good fit. That they have demonstrated ability to work with nonprofits before, or that their mission supports and aligns social justice, legal aid, public service, because this is very important to us. We actually have an intake system, like a proposal portal, where people have to kind of answer some additional questions about, like, do you understand our mission? How do you feel about these different things? And so we're going to evaluate that as part of, in addition to like the written RFP. So like a clear understanding of the values, our internal equity commitments, we put that out in our RFPs. Have they had experience working with community-based programs if they haven't worked with legal aid or other nonprofits? What other projects have they done? And like, do they have certificates, training, things like that? And then I kind of give you, like, what is a 5? A 5 would be they're super experienced, they have a strong alignment with our mission, and extensive relevant project history. So we tell people, if you think that these are the things, you should give them 5 points. And we have this put out for every single element that we're going to evaluate on. And then I kind of give some key questions that you can ask yourself when you're reading through their evaluation. Yes, it's a lot of information, but it's to make it so that we're not making decisions on like vibes and gut feelings. And then for each RFP they're evaluating, this is what it looks like for them. They just have this little grid, and they put in their number in here, like, okay, qualifications and experience. I kind of prompt them with the key questions, and they put their score in there. And then I encourage people to give like a very short reason for the score, not a novel, like 2 or 3 sentences for why they think that this score is deserved. And they fill this out for every single vendor, and then they turn them into me, and then I put them into a spreadsheet that calculates the overall scores. But I think it's it is a measured approach to evaluating a proposal so that people are not like just out in the wind making notes on the proposals they printed out. And if you did that, every different person on the team would be scoring things based on their values and what is important to them in their position. And it might not be like, you could get wildly different scores. And that should come into play a little bit. Like, I just don't think that this would benefit my role or the position that I do, or would be easy to use for the role that I'm doing, which is something they can put into the basis for the score, but it shouldn't be the sole foundation for why they're scoring things. Share this thing again. And I made all of that available, and Shelley has it. I think a link to share that with folks if you want to use these as samples. And then we have kind of a brief overview of, like, as you can see, you're scoring things. You've kind of decided what is important to you. And you want to kind of align some of that evaluation criteria on what your ROI goals are. So if one of your goals is to save staff time, that should be baked into like the request for proposal. You should make it very clear when you're requesting proposals. Your solution needs to save us time. We want to save 100 hours a year. We want to save as much time as possible. And then you should also think about collecting the baseline data, like how much time are we spending on this right now? I need to know that now so that when we finish this project, I can actually evaluate how successful it was. But it should be baked into the evaluation process for picking a vendor, for reviewing the proposals, and for putting out the proposal and writing your project plan and all of that. And then I also have shared with Shelley a kind of prompt worksheet, or I don't know what you want to call it, a cheat sheet for how you can help use AI tools to structure and refine evaluation metrics. Tips for like prompts that you can put in there to help you draft these evaluation metrics. You can literally ask it. If you're comfortable with AI, you don't want to put proprietary information in there. You don't want to violate your program's rules, but I find it very helpful to say things like, hey, these are the evaluation criteria that we're going to be using. Can you give me a sample scoring rubric for evaluating the contractors based on the 1 to 5 scale? Can you give me examples of what a 1 would be and what a 5 would be? Can you tell me what questions I should ask in the interview process? Why should you do everything from scratch? Of course, if you don't feel comfortable with AI and you want to spend way more time doing it from scratch, you can. There's probably also stuff that's been created at your organization that you can refer to. You can Google, and there will be all sorts of information that other people have already put together. But I put this together. I think it's pretty helpful. It's some of the kinds of prompts that I use to help me draft these, because I really don't want to do everything from scratch every single time. I'm way too lazy or efficient, whatever you want to call it, to start from a blank page every time. I'm addicted to AI. I admit it now. If it goes away, my life is going to be so slow. It's going to be like going from a bullet train to a horse and buggy.
Well, I don't think we're in danger of AI going away. So,
Probably not.
I actually want to go back to a point you just made about, if you're asking for them to solve a particular problem, and the example you gave was make your staff more efficient or save time. And you mentioned know where you are now. For organizations that may not know how to measure those things, what are your thoughts on asking for that to be part of the proposal that they evaluate and then look at the
I
final?
mean, you definitely could ask. We've done proposals before where part of it was like assess what we're doing now and then give us suggestions for solutions based on how we're doing now. And I guess my one thing about that is like, are they evaluating their own progress? Of course, they're gonna be like, our solution was great. We totally solved your problem. And also like, one thing about having an outside person evaluate things like how much time are you spending on this now? They don't know your processes. So you spend a lot of time telling them what your processes are for them to tell you what your processes are. um, we've done, if you have good software, you can pull numbers. Sometimes you have to get kind of creative because you might not be able to capture all that, or you might not be capturing it. Or sometimes we've just asked staff, on average, how long do you think you're spending doing this? How much time do you feel that you spend doing this task? And then afterwards, we'll say, do you think this is faster? Does this new process save you time? And the perception of saving time can be just as important for the staff as actual time saving sometimes. If it feels less frustrating, if it feels more effective or efficient, that can really increase staff satisfaction. There's always going to be some staff where if you prove it's better, they still think it's worse because they don't like change, but we can't solve for all of it. Anybody else have any other questions, concerns? Thanks for the 4 people who stuck with us.
And just so you know, I did share during the presentation the link to the webpage that is for session 1 that has all of the documents that she shared, and then session 2 with all of the documents. They're all available right there on the webpage, and the recording for today's session will be added to that page shortly.
And at the next session, if you're willing to hang in there with us, I'm going to go over in great detail how to make these ROIs. And I think boards of directors and upper management really like them. So if you're trying to sell projects and gain confidence, like have people be confident that when you propose a project, it is actually going to work out the way you claim it's going to work out, and that you are good at spotting good projects to do. This is a great way to kind of gain that. And I usually try to measure cost and time savings and other things, maybe clients served or other areas, so that it hits a variety of different people. Because like the accounting department is looking at something very different than like managers of staff attorneys or directors of programs or your resource development folks who are writing grants. I try to hit it all, like what all of you want this, and these are the reasons. And I think it's really helpful. And people in my experience like to have a paper that they can show off. And sometimes the metrics are kind of arbitrary, but they're meaningful to a variety of different people.
So we do have a question, and
Mhm.
the question is, what is the minimum number of evaluators that is recommended for a process?
I think 4 to 6 is a good number. I mean, if you go too small, you just are not getting perspectives. And I know it's hard with smaller programs. I mean, if your program is 6 people, you might not be able to have 4 to 6 people on the process, but you can't have one. One person's gonna miss a bunch of things that multiple people wouldn't, especially when you're kind of lost in the sauce with it.
And I think that that is an opportunity to use the Ellison Tap listserv, right? Is
Mm,
to reach out and say, hey, we're doing this and we don't have enough staff in our organization. Would you like to participate in our process so that you have the experience for something that you're going to be doing coming up? So having an outside person can be an option if you just don't have the staff in your um, you know, in your organization itself. Or it might be that an organization is going to be doing an RFP evaluation, and you could say, hey, we're going to do this in the future. Can I jump in and participate in your process? So
yeah, I mean,
something to
you
think
could
about.
ask a funder to participate. You could ask someone from your board of directors. You could ask a community partner. You could ask a client. I mean, you can reach outside of your organization, another organization in the state. If you see that, as Shelley has said, if you see somebody else has done a similar project, say, would you come to our meeting and or look these over and tell us if you think these are realistic? I haven't ever reached out to somebody and had them tell me no, that they wouldn't help. We're in a helpful profession, and the people we work with tend to be helpful and want to help us and participate.
And I think the other thing is we often overlook the training option of giving people who are in lower positions is not the word I want to use, in positions of lesser authority.
Mhm.
So if we allow them to have that development opportunity, we are building our organization from the inside,
Mhm.
and you're providing skill building for those staff members that they might not be given the opportunity unless you think outside the box and
Yeah.
think below, not just up
I
in
mean,
the
that is
structure.
something that the younger attorneys often given their like annual evaluations is they want development opportunities and they don't know what all of them are. And so explaining to supervisors or managing attorneys, like this is a development opportunity for your staff. They should want to participate in these things. It's leadership skills. Um, they're learning how to communicate with outside partners and work with other team members. I mean, I think it's a great idea to also advertise the reasons why people want to participate in it, not just to have a say in a particular project, but the long-term skills that you are developing. And I also love the idea of asking non-legal PAI volunteers to participate.
And for people who may not know, what does PAI stand for?
Private attorney involvement, some folks call pro bono.
Great, thank you. All right. Well, thank you everyone for sticking it out with us. We had a small group, but the ones that stayed had access to all the great resources that Sarah provided. The recording will get added to that webpage, and then next month's session will also be linked to the sessions that we have already available. But thank you so much for coming. Sarah, thank you so much for interrupting your vacation to be with us today. I appreciate it. Have a great afternoon,
Thank
everyone.
you. Bye, everybody.